What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Touchline Talk. Thanks so much for tuning in. Second match day of the Premier League season is in the books. Wanted to give some thoughts, starting with biggest game of the weekend, perhaps the most consequential result of the weekend, and that is Spurs going into the Etihad, coming away with a 2-0 victory, continuing their recent track record of success against Manchester City. And I want to begin on the Spurs side of this, specifically talking about Thomas Frank, because I think we are in danger of not fully appreciating the work that he is doing and has done. He has already dealt with injuries to two of his most creative players who were not available for this game and are not going to be available for at least a little while, in James Madison's case, a long time. He has already lost out on two primary transfer targets, both creative players. We'll talk about one of those later because he was introduced by another North London team this weekend. And despite all of this, he has Spurs 2-0. He has played PSG and Manchester City in a 3-game stretch, did not lose either game, should have won both of them, but they gave up those goals and ultimately fell in a penalty shootout, but they still didn't lose the game to PSG over 90 minutes, and they just handled Manchester City on their home field. In Thomas Frank's last 7 games against Manchester City and Pep Guardiola, his teams have 3 wins, 3 losses, and a draw with the exact same number of goals conceded and scored. He has played Pep Guardiola even over 7 games, 6 of which were as Brentford's manager. He's led Brentford to top half finishes. He has had success with Brentford with multiple different sets of players leading that attack. Ivan Toney went from being a massive piece that all of these other bigger clubs wanted to an afterthought because of what Mbeumo and Wissa did last season. On top of all of that, he is also one of the most tactically flexible managers in the Premier League. He has come in and immediately made Spurs a much, much, much better team. There is a reason why his appointment was so widely applauded, because he is just an objectively better manager than Ange Postecoglou. He is perhaps the best manager that Spurs could have hired. And he is showing you why. And at the end of the day, a manager's job is to get the most out of the players that are available to them, to maximize the potential of the squad. Thomas Frank does that as well as any manager in the Premier League. He doesn't need specific sets of players. He doesn't need a specific style of play. He doesn't need specific circumstances. He doesn't need a board to spend all this money. He doesn't need to rebuild his team. He just works with what he has, and he makes them much better. That is the purest form of coaching, and I just don't think we're giving this guy enough credit. And I said in my prediction, Spurs are going to finish top 5. That team is talented. Not quite the same as the 4 teams I think are going to finish ahead of them, but it's a combination of they're clearly not the 17th best team in the league, and it was my belief in him as a manager. And so far, he's making me look pretty good. We'll see if it continues. On the Manchester City side of this, I'm not convinced that this means it's going to be a continuation last season. Because last week it was, look at City, they're back, title favorites, theirs to lose, and now I refuse to do this 180-degree turn all the time and allow the narrative to change every single week based on one result. Was it a bad performance? Yeah. Was it concerning? Yeah. It ultimately wasn't that bad of a performance in the sense that you got caught out once, which is going to happen when you play the way Pep plays, and your goalkeeper made a horrible decision for the second goal. It's not Spurs were comfortable because City didn't do enough in attack, but it's not like Spurs dominated the game. Not that anybody expected them to, and this is often how you beat City, is by capitalizing on the couple moments you have. But to me, it did feel at least a little bit different than last season. And the other big part of this is that Rodri did take the field. Rodri is going to be, theoretically, hopefully, back at 100% at some point in the near future here, in the next month or so, maybe even sooner. I'll continue to say, last season demonstrated, every time City don't have him demonstrates how important he is to this team. There is no other player in the world to replace him. There is nothing you can do. He is a step above everybody else. It's why he won the Ballon d'Or. Getting him back is a huge deal, even for Manchester City. There are also all these new players. There are a lot of things. I still trust Pep and his excitement about the season, his belief it's going to be different. Does that mean they win the title? No, not necessarily. They were my pick. I'm not backing off of that after 2 weeks. Does this title feel open and up for grabs? Yes. You could talk me into Liverpool, you could talk me into Arsenal, you could talk me into City. You cannot talk me into Chelsea at this point, but I don't see much between those three teams. The two things, though, that I was thinking about coming out of this game. Number one, it still doesn't make sense in my head why Pep has seemingly discarded the goalkeeper who was born to play in his system. This whole Ederson thing is just confusing to me. And obviously, I don't know exactly what's going on. But I'm almost already kind of to the point where I wonder if you have to rethink this entire thing. And this idea that he was going to leave during this window. Because James Trafford doesn't look ready. Maybe Donnarumma comes in. But Donnarumma is also not doing the things that Pep wants of his goalkeeper. He is not a Pep goalkeeper. That is the reason Luis Enrique is getting rid of him. So to me, that doesn't solve the problem either. If you're going to play the way Pep plays, Ederson is the best goalkeeper on the planet to have. And I don't know what happened and where this all changed. But that mistake that Trafford made altered that game and pretty much ended it. It didn't feel like City were coming back from that. But when you're only a goal down and you've got the guys on the bench that they had, there's always a chance. And if they get one, there's always a chance they get the second. You've seen that time and time again. So I am very curious to see what impact, if any, this game and what happens over the next week heading into the end of the transfer window impacts Pep's thinking and impacts Ederson's future. Because I was just watching that thinking, if that's Ederson, I'm just not sure that they make that mistake. Obviously, it didn't decide the game in a literal sense based on the scoreline. But it was the defining moment of the game. And it's just a lot to go ask a goalkeeper who's never done it on this level before to go play in a incredibly demanding system for a team expected to win a title. The bigger picture thing. I talked about this in my written Premier League preview. This is the first time since Pep first got Manchester City to the top of England that City's spot at the top of the Premier League hierarchy is in jeopardy. Yes, they have not won every Premier League title since they won the first to now, obviously. My point is, at the start of every season, including this one, everybody, not literally, but a vast majority of people, they were the consensus pick to win the league because most people were going, I will not bet against this team and this manager. And more times than not, they validated that. They have never lost 2 in a row. Right? It's always, okay, they had a down season, it happens, they bounce back. That's always been the narrative, and it's been accurate. Particularly if Liverpool go on to win this title, it is not a conversation. The hierarchy has changed and Liverpool's at the top. If Arsenal go on to win this title, it's a very interesting conversation because now you have three different champions over 3 seasons, kind of in three different spots, and you can make cases in different ways for different teams as to who the top of the hierarchy is. Right? This is not a year to year, a season to season thing. This is about just who is the top club, the standard bearer for the Premier League. Right now, it is still Manchester City. But that could change very quickly here. And that loss brings back a lot of questions about whether there are going to be more growing pains and more of a continuation of last season than many people, including me, expected. You can't decide that after one bad game, one loss, 2 games into a season. But the fact that it was there so early is notable. The second part of this, I want to spend some time talking about all of the things that happened with Arsenal, because there were a lot of them, but specifically putting 2 different pieces together here, not necessarily about the game. I mean, the scoreline speaks for itself. More set piece goals. Gyökeres gets on the board with his 2. But the Eberechi Eze signing, the injuries to Bukayo Saka and Martin Odegaard. I've had conversations with friends who are Arsenal fans and even just Premier League fans where I've expressed this idea of, I don't understand why it took Arsenal this long to get serious about Eze, and it kind of seems like this was a response to Kai Havertz getting injured. Now, part of this is also being complicated by Crystal Palace's situation, the fact that they had this Europa League Conference League, the fact that earlier they were in the Europa League and then they weren't, and then they appealed, right? There's been a lot of uncertainty about what this season is going to look like and their ability to prepare for it, which is at least part of why I think it took this long for an Eze deal to get done. But even then, Spurs had everything lined up, and then Arsenal got involved, and Arsenal won out because Eze wanted to go back to Arsenal. This is the club he has the attachment to. This is his boyhood club. If he didn't have this kind of connection and this history with Arsenal, he's probably playing for the other North London team right now, and he is probably getting introduced as a Tottenham player. Which is why I said I don't understand why Arsenal had to go hijack this at the last second. And I say that because Eze is not an emergency stopgap solution for Kai Havertz. He is not the same kind of player. He is a much better player, and he is somebody that if you are serious about trying to go to the next level and to actually win this title, it is somewhere between incredibly beneficial and essential to have. And what happened on Saturday is exactly why. Last season, Saka, Odegaard, specifically Saka with the long-term injury, but you missed one of them, you missed both of them, all of a sudden, Arsenal are a different team. For all of the talk about the striker, and that was an essential upgrade as well, there's also the other part of this, which is you are putting so much pressure on 2 guys who sometimes have been very reliable, generally have been reliable, but also you have Saka coming off of this muscular injury. Odegaard seems to miss a few games here and there. You can't count on both of them for 36 games a season. And when they are not there, there is nobody to replace them. Now you have had both of them leave the field in Game 2. The early indications are not particularly positive. And if Eze wasn't walking through the door, there are probably the exact same conversations being had about last season of this. Are we going to repeat this again where the key players, the creative forces get injured and that ruins the title chances? Now, there's also the bigger questions here. I'm going to get to that in a little bit in terms of my Arteta style of play, all that. But there's no denying that losing Odegaard and or Saka for an extended period of time is a huge deal. Eze mitigates that, at least to an extent. You still feel very good about, we'll just say, a Martinelli, Eze, Trossard, Gyökeres, front three with Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi behind him. And, by the way, the best center back pairing in the Premier League. Right? You still feel good about that team. That is a team that can hold its own and keep them in the title race until everybody gets healthy. Eze is not a luxury that you can afford. He is a crucial part of making sure that this team is set up to make the best possible run at this title. And I would argue he is the final piece to a title caliber team. That even with Gyökeres, you were relying on Odegaard and Saka to stay healthy. And you just can't do that. For any players, but specifically the two of them, they're not the most reliable in terms of their availability. Now you don't have that concern as much. Now, if they're both done for the season or something, different conversation. But you can bide yourself some time with Eze being the creative force and the one running the show. Which gets me to my big point here that I hinted at earlier. If you are Mikel Arteta, you have everything you could possibly ask for. You got your striker. You have three not necessarily number 10s, but the string pullers, the guys who can go win you games as the best attacking player on the field, the creative forces. You've got your midfield reinforcement. You've got a bunch of defenders. You've got a very good goalkeeper. From a squad standpoint, from a roster building standpoint, there are no excuses. There's none of the, okay, this player got injured. Look at the depth they have. There's not the, well, they don't have the cutting edge number 9 of the same caliber as these other teams up here. They just spent money because they decided Gyökeres is that guy. He's got 2 goals. You don't know exactly how he's going to fit in yet. It's too early, but he's gotten on the score sheet. He's going to have the opportunity to prove he's that guy. If he's not, that's an Arsenal problem. That's not an investment problem. That's also a coaching thing, right? Arteta said, this is my guy. So he, for better or worse, has attached himself to Gyökeres as the solution. If they don't significantly improve this season, if they don't go wire-to-wire challenging for this thing, I'm not going to the if they don't win it because I don't think that's fair. But if they come up short in the way that they did last season, it is going to be really hard for Mikel Arteta to convince Arsenal fans specifically, and maybe the board as well, that he is the guy to get this done. And I have been a huge defender of Mikel Arteta. But even in this game, I was listening to Gary Neville's share some of his thoughts on it, and he already made the point. They looked a little lethargic, lacking some ideas in that first half before. And, of course, I got text from a friend who's an Arsenal fan. It'd be nice to score off of something other than a set piece. These narratives are already starting to come back, even though they scored 5 goals in this game. If they don't find a way to unleash these attacking players and become a little bit more dynamic and find a better balance, Mikel Arteta has to answer for that. And that makes this a fascinating season for this team. Because every year you kind of feel like, okay, this is their year. The window's there. Last season, it's built for Arsenal, and then Liverpool are the ones who jump into the window that opened up. This is going to be a more challenging one, I feel like. But this is the team that's finally equipped to do it. There are no excuses. Mikel Arteta's got everything he needs. The question is whether he can deliver. And we're going to have to see over the next 36 games. This is going to continue to be a storyline. Obviously, you got to see how long these injuries are going to be for Odegaard and Saka, how serious they are. But this is why you had to go get Eberechi Eze. Because now you still feel like you're okay and you can hang in there and keep pace until you get that team back, because nobody's ever going to be able to just rely on 11 players. You can't just say when healthy, because nobody's ever entirely healthy. Go ask Spurs about that. You ask Manchester City about their injuries last season. The list goes on and on. Liverpool have had seasons where they've dealt with all kinds of injuries. Things happen. That's why you need to have more players than it looks like you actually need. Arsenal have that now. They have the number 9. They have their third creative player, the guy who can be the stopgap if you don't have Odegaard and or Saka. Now it's time to see. Arteta's on the clock. Is he going to deliver? Is this team going to get this done? I feel like this is wide open. Not necessarily that we're at the Arsenal's to lose point. We just don't have enough data yet. But that is how much this Eberechi Eze signing means. In my eyes, it takes you from in the conversation to right there, if not 1A, kind of 1B situation in terms of favorites. And doing this on the same day that Manchester City already lost, and now you have some more questions about that, only makes it that much, only cements Arsenal's status as one of the teams to go beat. And obviously everybody knew that coming in. But not just a contender, but kind of the front runner. It's too early to have a decisive number, one. But they might have jumped ahead of Manchester City in the power rankings this week, kind of thing. So, gonna have to see if they can keep it up, see if they ultimately deliver. But Eberechi Eze, Arsenal player, cannot undersell the importance of this. It is the kind of signing, ultimately this is the point I was getting at. It's the kind of signing that can decide a title and can be the thing that gets Arsenal over the line. We'll see if it ends up being the case. That's all I've got for you. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.